Okay, now I mentioned earlier that if the sustain level is set to something, is set to maximum, the decay has really no, it becomes irrelevant because there's nothing to decay to. On the other hand, if I set the sustain at 0, then the release could have no meaning because depending on how fast the decay is set for. But if you hold the key long enough for it to decay all the way down to 0, then there's nothing left to happen after you release that key, so the release will be meaningless. And let's take a quick look at that. So the sustain level is 0. I'm going to give it a longer attack time just to make sure, a longer attack time and decay, so we can actually hear the attack and the decay, but it's going to decay down to 0, and I'm going to hold on to the key until that happens so that you'll see that the release is irrelevant. I'll have a long release time even to prove that I'm telling you the truth here. So we've got a almost at halfway attack and decay time, but the sustain is at 0. So when the decay completes its curve, or when the decay is completed, it'll be down to 0 even though I'm still holding the key. So here we go. Gets up to the maximum, decays out, decays down to 0. My sustain level is 0. So there's nothing to happen once I release the key. It's already at 0. So the release time, even though we've got the maximum release time here, absolutely irrelevant, because by the time I release the key, the sustain level is already down to 0. So there's nowhere else for this to go. We're already there. Okay, I think, let's see if I have any other charts here. Okay. Well, we'll try it. Here's another one. I think this is the last one. Since I spent some time preparing this, we might as well look at it. This will have a slow attack time, fast decay, sustain something less than maximum, slow release time. Okay, so here we go. Slow attack time, we'll put the attack time up at about 7. Otherwise we'll be here all day. Decay time will be fast, and I'm going to put the sustain down to, again, something less than the maximum so that we can actually hear that decay, and then a long release time. And that's what this will sound like this. So we've got a slow attack, a quick decay down to the sustain levels, remains at the sustain level until I release the key, at which time it will go into the slow release rate. That was the decay you just heard. Stays at the sustain level until I release. Then there's a long release time, getting back down to 0. So let's check that again and listen for that decay. When I press the key, you're going to hear a relatively slow attack up to the maximum volume. When I release it, or it'll hit the maximum volume, it will decay down to the sustain level. When I release the key, you'll hear a long release. There was the decay right there to the sustain level. Release. Now, to demonstrate how the hold works on the Korg MS-10, the hold time, once again, on the Korg MS-10, we've got this additional stage of our envelope generator, or contour, and that's the hold. That's what happens here. When I release the key, it's not going to immediately go down, it's not going to immediate release as it does on your basic ADSR. So once I release the key, in this case, it's going to continue to hold the sustain level by itself for some time until, you know, whatever time that's set for, and then it's going to release. So let's set a fairly quick attack time. Here I've got it set at 2. Decay time, we'll set it a little bit longer just so you can hear the decay down to the sustain level, which I'll set at about 5. I'm going to set a fairly quick release time, and let's check that out first without the hold. Now watch what happens as soon as I release that key. It immediately begins to diminish from the sustain level down to a 0. So once again, key on, attack, decay, we're holding it at the sustain level, and when I release, immediately begins to fade out. Now, when I turn the hold setting up somewhere above 0, you're going to see something different from the point that I released that key. So, key on, we hear a quick attack, decay, we're at the sustain level. Now, when I release the key, it stays at the sustain level for some time, hand is here, and then releases down to 0. Try that again. I'm gonna give it a little bit longer of a hold time this time. So, key on, hear the attack, pretty fairly quickly goes to a decay down to the sustain level. Holding the sustain level, I will release the key, hands off, it's still holding that sustain level. I've got the hold time set at about 7, and then goes into a release. So what happened was, going back over to my graphic representation, key on, we had an attack time, as soon as it hits the maximum volume, drops down to a sustain level, holds that. Once I release the key, it does not immediately release down, fade back down to 0. Instead, the synthesizer continues to hold that note for me for however long I have that set. And again, on these analog synthesizers, I cannot determine this in terms of an exact time, in terms of seconds or microseconds. It's either a short, medium, long, you know, anywhere from 0 to 10. There's infinite continuous spectrum from 0 to 10, however long this hold time will be, and then it releases back down to 0. So that's basically the envelope generator on the Korg MS-10 as it applies to the amplifier, the voltage controlled amplifier. Now let's look at how we can apply that to the filter. Now remember, look at the filter here. The filter here determines our tone quality. And what I'm doing here is I'm changing that frequency cutoff point, above which, wherever this point is set, whichever frequency this is at, all frequencies below that point are passed through the filter, and all frequencies above that filter point, cutoff point, are filtered out. Now, here I'm changing it manually. So I'm going up to a maximum cutoff point, back down, and then I could go back down to 0. Now, if we apply the envelope generator, we can let the synthesizer do that work for us. Okay, so what we're going to do, again, we've got a medium. Here's your contour. I'm going to set a slow attack time, medium decay time, sustain level, which would be, in this case, when applied to the filter, is a frequency cutoff point, something less than the maximum, and a fairly fast release time. So let's set that up first. And now, to apply this envelope generator to your filter, if you look at here, modulation means change, to change something. So to modulate this, we can either modulate it manually, we're changing or modulating the frequency cutoff point, or we can ask the envelope generator, if you see down here, EG/EXT. EXT means external if we have an external trigger or controller. But in this case, we're going to apply the envelope generator, our EG, applied to the cutoff frequency to modulate that frequency. So here's the note with just the envelope generator just on the amplifier. We're hearing changes over time in the volume of the note, but not in the timbre or the filter setting. Now, on the other hand, if we apply the envelope generator also to the filter, you're going to hear a change in not only the volume over time, but also the timbre over time. If I turn up the peak, which is the resonance, and I'll talk about that in my tutorial on the filter. Anyway, this is going to, by turning this up, you're going to hear that a little bit more. You're going to hear the change in time, change in frequency, cutoff point over time. So here we go. So now we're not only hearing, the synthesizer is not only changing the volume for us over time, it's doing that work for us by changing the amplifier settings, but it's also changing the filter settings. I think you can hear that kind of metallic sound that's kind of increasing over time and then decreasing back to a sustain level, which is this, wherever we have this set, it goes up to a maximum, back down to our sustain level, and holds that there until we release the key. So one more time, kind of like a wah, wah. Okay. Now, if you're not able to hear that, when I apply the envelope generator to the pitch, that'll become very clear what's happening. So remember, we've got our oscillator, which allows us to change the pitch. Over time by manually changing that potentiometer, or we can use the envelope generator to do that work for us. So here we've got our envelope generator. Once again, we're going to have some settings here. We've got an attack time, which is going to determine the rate at which the pitch will go up to a high pitch, back down to some other pitch level, and then back down to 0. So we've got an attack time, medium, decay time. I'm going to put the sustain somewhere below maximum so that we can hear that change in pitch, and then a release time. Now here it is without. Now we're applying the envelope generator to the amplifier only, so all we're going to hear is a change in volume over time following the contour of our envelope generator settings. Okay, so we're going to hear volume increase, decrease, hold, decrease back down to 0. I've got my hold time on here, but here we go. One more time. Key on, goes up to a maximum, decays down to the sustain level, holds the sustain level. I release the key, the hold holds it for a little bit longer, and then decay or releases back down to 0. Now, let's see what happens when we apply this envelope generator, these settings right here. We're going to apply to the frequency modulation. And remember, we said frequency is pitch, or determines pitch anyway. So if we're modulating or changing the frequency over time, we're going to hear a change in pitch over time. So again, here we've got our envelope generator. EXT is external envelope generator. We're going to apply these settings to the frequency, i.e. pitch, and see what happens. Okay, so what just happened there was, when I hit the key, the pitch went from the starting point up to some higher pitch, back down to the sustain level pitch, and when I release it, it holds for a second because I've got the hold time on. I'm going to turn that off just so it complicates things. It's a little simpler. You're going to hear the pitch rise to a maximum, decay to a sustain level, and then release back down to the minimum or the lowest frequency or pitch. Here we go. That's our sustain level frequency. When I release the key, you're going to hear another decrease in pitch, or yeah, it'll go down in pitch. What's happening again is the pitch is starting at some, when I hit the key, it starts at some certain point, increases in pitch, goes up to a higher pitch, decays down to a certain sustained level pitch. When I release it, it drops back down. Now, the envelope generator, as I said, it's hardwired to apply to the amplifier, so we're really kind of stuck with that. But we're also going to apply it not only to the pitch, but we're going to apply it again to our filter. So you're going to hear simultaneously, following this contour, you're going to hear a change in volume, pitch, and timbre over time following this contour. Alright, fun stuff. Here we go. You ready? You ready? Okay. I'm going to give it a little bit more on the filter to make my point here. So one more time, give it a little bit more of attack time. Decay time is fine. A little bit more of a release. And here we go. Release. So what you just heard was we've got this same contour being applied to the volume, simultaneously to the pitch, and simultaneously to the timbre of a note. Those are all changing in time following this contour. And I'm going to add the whole time in. I'll give you one more example, and that should be a wrap. Okay, here we go. The whole time is up, so it doesn't immediately release down to 0. One more time, and that'll be a wrap. Okay, that's it. Envelope generators, as demonstrated on the Korg MS-10. I'm Marshall Hong. For more of my videos, please go to www.hongsongs.com. See you next time. Thanks.